Hello
Welcome.
there, listeners of the Bylines Network podcast. We are week 2 into a war that has already been won.
I'm
I'm Dean in Bristol.
I'm Chris in London.
I'm Stella in Manchester.
We welcome a brand new cast member, ladies and gentlemen. We have Stella Rogers. Stella, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm Stella. I'm from Manchester, as previously said. I'm studying for a journalism master's right now, so I can become disgustingly overeducated. And I studied politics at undergrad, so I like a bit of constitutional analysis.
Who do you write for at the Bylines?
Oh, I write for Northwest Bylines.
There we go. So we have a bit more representation. Instead of two white guys talking about politics, we now have three white people giving their opinions about politics. Diversity win.
And we have a northerner.
And a northerner. Yay. We thought, since there's obviously nothing interesting going on in the world right now, and I mean, like, it's very quiet, the longest it's been quiet for the longest time, we thought we'd talk about an issue, not issue, a subject that's been talked about for a long time that might become a reality soon. We're going to be talking about 16-year-olds being allowed to vote at the next general election. The bill has been discussed basically since like the Blair days. Various left-leaning groups from Labour to the Greens have given their support, but it's just like it's never become like a thing until this government, which pledged to do it in their manifesto and have now introduced a bill, I believe, to Parliament to debate, and it's currently going through the process. So by the next general election in 2029, if it is 2029, 16-year-olds will be able to vote for the first time. So we thought we'd go over a bit of the facts, bit of the misconceptions people have about it. Chris, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll get started. So the representation of the people bill, that's where a fair amount of significant changes to the way our democracy works will be implemented. And it's currently going through Parliament and it's at committee stage. And what that essentially means is it can be it's being debated by a committee of MPs. They're discussing what things to change, what things to maybe remove or add, change wording. But in essence, the bill will come out with certain key things intact. And Jules has already mentioned the votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. There are a number of other really important things in the bill, though, that I think it's worth talking about. One of which is automatic voter registration. Just we can get to vote 16 in a second, but I think just it does tie in slightly. When you look at how the registration system for voting works now, people have to go to their local authority's website or the gov.uk website, I believe, and say, I would like to register to vote. Here's my details. This is my name. This is my address. Um, and you have to manually apply. You have to do that whenever you move house as well. So obviously at the moment, not a lot of young people own their own homes. They're renting, they're moving quite often. That may be between constituencies, that may be between local authority areas too. And also when you're moving house, come on, you've got a million things to worry about apart from voter registration. So making that automatic is gonna improve franchisement for quite a lot of people. What I thought was particularly interesting when I was doing a bit of reading before we were recording today was the Electoral Commission looked at a pilot in Wales that did automatic voter registration. And they found out that it added about 15,000 new voters to the electoral roll, which they say is about 2 to 8% of the register across local authority areas. Now, if that was implemented UK wide, that number would be huge. How I'm tying this into votes for 16 and 17-year-olds, though, is because lots of maybe young people may not be paying attention to politics. And like lots of people like to say 16 and 17-year-olds are engaged, and they are, but there are a significant portion that aren't and just won't know that they're going to be able to vote at the next election. So having them automatically registered and getting that polling card, getting that communication saying you're on the register, it's a reminder that they're part of the system now, they have a say. Potentially, I think it has the chance to change our democracy radically.
Yeah,
Right,
definitely.
Stella, your keen analysis. This is your first time, remember, so absolutely no pressure.
No pressure at all. No, I agree with you there, Chris, on enfranchising more people to vote is like obviously really important for democracy. Also, a thing I like about this bill, which I don't usually like things that are going through Parliament, but I like this one, is the clamping down on funding from like foreign entities, especially like in the current climate, where you have anti-abortion think tanks and you follow the money and they're funded by Christian nationalism groups in America. So I think that is something we need to really clamp down on.
I
So yeah.
did literally see a report today of the Electoral Commission cannot work out who donated a crypto donation to Nigel Farage. And that's not terrifying at all.
Because the democratic process is meant to be open, right, and transparent. And when you have entities who are able to donate anonymously in that way, it's not conducive to any like democratic process at all, really.
There's like a lot of really good things to like secure our democracy, but the one that I find really, really fascinating is probably the least interesting part of it, which is allowing more people to vote, enfranchising the young. Because uh, when I first registered to vote, which was 2013, by the way, my first election was likely my local elections in Hertfordshire. The Conservatives won. I didn't vote for the Conservatives. But definitely around that time, when I was 17, there was a lot of talk about why 16 and 17-year-olds should vote. A lot of them don't really apply anymore because they were like, oh, you can drink alcohol in the presence of an adult when you're 16. You can start to rent, you can move out, you can join the army, all these kind of things. And a really good point that I had at the time is if you can join the army, you should at the very least vote for the people who are giving you orders. What about you two? When did you first vote?
So my
No.
birthday, I'm born in 1998, and my birthday's in July. So I missed out on being able to vote in the Brexit referendum by literally a month. Um, which I'm still very bitter about. Not that it would have changed the result, but actually thinking about it, if 16 and 17-year-olds were able to vote in that referendum, maybe the result would have been different. And I think it would have been. And
There was also, if I remember correctly, there was also talk around whether it should be lowered to 16 or 17 just for the referendum, because Scotland had lowered its voting age, so not all the eligible voters in Scotland could vote for it because it was a UK-wide thing. So that was
yeah,
that was a legitimate debate about it. We'll come to Scotland in a minute. I can hear you all screaming into your phone, Scottish listeners, but we're going to get to it in a minute, I promise.
I mean, it is worth saying that bringing votes to 16 and 17-year-olds brings England in line with Scotland and Wales. But yeah, that was my first sort of interaction with democracy of like, oh, well, I'm only a month off. So like I had friends in my year group at school who were voting and they were voting for like stupid reasons. But a lot of people in my year group were like, I'm just going to vote Brexit because like, why wouldn't I? Like, just for the bans. I think the point that, and something the government again is looking at separate to this bill. So the Department for Education did a curriculum and assessment review, and that recommended improvements to democratic education and mandating citizenship education in primary schools. Now, I don't I don't remember having many citizenship lessons, even at secondary school. So I reckon combining votes at 16 with improved citizenship education, which this review has recommended, really would sort of result in the change. Maybe you wouldn't have people like the ones in my year group saying, I'm going to vote Brexit for the bans.
What about you, Stella? What was your first interaction with democracy?
I think mine was actually like really boring, but I was so excited to go out and vote that I just like skipped off to the polling station. I think it was for a police crime commissioner.
Mm.
And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I'll vote the Green Party on that one.
So, as Chris mentioned earlier, um, bringing down the voting age to include 16 and 17-year-olds actually brings us in line with the rest of the Isle of Great Britain. I believe they got the right to vote in, God, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they got the right to vote in like 2014, just in time for the referendum. And the results from that are, one of the biggest pieces of proof that people who want 16-year-olds to vote for why this would work, because the percentage of 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds who voted in the Scottish elections is actually higher than the full turnouts. 75% of eligible young people voted in the referendum, and they've
Mm.
been voting ever since. Now, what makes this interesting is that Wales did the exact same thing, and pretty much no one turned out. I believe it was like something like 2% of young people turned out. But with the caveat of this was done in 2020 or 2021. And I don't know if you remember 2021, but it was a plague year.
Also, do you think a part of it is that, like, obviously 2015 was a pretty big year for Scotland. You had like
14.
a referendum on independence for that year. So you probably have a population who are like very politically engaged for that time period. Whereas like the like political moment of the day in Wales was COVID, which was a everywhere issue. So why would people be super politically involved on that like hyper not hyper local but local level, I suppose.
Mm.
I mean, I would be interested to see is that how is that going to translate to the elections we're going to see in the next few weeks? Because they've already got votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. In England, we don't yet because it's still a bill, it's not an act. So in Wales, it'll be interesting to see because obviously these next elections will be the first set since COVID to the Senate. How whether well, that's how we'll know if COVID was a factor or not.
Yeah, I guess it'll be, you'll see if my theory is right or not.
We will return in May.
We will actually be returning in May. I guess it will be very interesting because I watched a video, and the guy who spoke to a minister, I forget which minister, I assume is the one in charge of elections and stuff. And she said the main reasons why Labour wanted to include 16 and 17-year-olds is because right now faith in democracy is dire. But there are several countries in the world and in Europe, distressingly, who say that we might actually be better off with a dictatorship than a democracy. And she thought that a way to engage young people is to, well, actually engage with them. Do you guys agree with that? That if we allow 16-year-olds to vote, that will engage them in the political process a bit more?
I think so, because how can you expect young people to be engaged in democracy if there's nothing to engage with apart from fake versions of democracy? Like, did you ever do it in school where you had like a fake election? But the whole time you're like, this is just make believe, like nothing's actually going to happen, so it doesn't matter. I think a lot of the conversation around this has always been like, well, 16-year-olds just don't care about democracy and they don't care about voting in political parties. And it's like, well, of course they don't, because it means nothing to them. They can't engage in it. So if you give them that way to engage with it, then it's like chicken and egg, I guess. But then I'm sure that will follow that people do get more interested in politics. I think we're being condescending to 16-year-olds when we say that they can't be engaged in politics because they can, and most of the time they are, but they just don't, they can't put the words to what they're engaged in.
I agree. This sort of brings me back to when I first joined the Labour Party and I started getting involved in the constituency Labour Party. And I was one of the young, I remember walking in and I was one of the youngest people in the room. And then they were like, ah, a young person, you can run our youth engagement and youth things. And I was like, yeah, but where are the young people? That's the problem. Young people often are not really listened to in those spaces anyway right now. And I think in partly because they don't vote. A lot of young people don't vote, but also like 16, 17-year-olds, they don't have the vote. So political parties aren't really interested in getting their vote or interesting them at all. There's a whole new group of people who now can vote. So maybe we'll see policies aimed at them to try and get them to vote. I mean, they're what's it? I think 1.5 extra million or 1.7 million additional people. It's only a good thing, in my opinion.
But yeah, no, that does actually make sense because 16-year-olds or teenagers in general are curious about everything. They're curious about like themselves, their sexuality, what they like to look like, what they like to dress as. So it makes sense that one of the ways they engage with the world is through like, oh, people who are meant to represent me, who end up not representing you in any way, shape, or form. Welcome to politics, kids.
Also, can I
Although,
make a point about the concept of like political engagement? When we're talking about 16-year-olds, there's almost like a litmus test where we have to prove, like in the conversation, there's people who are pro 16-year-olds voting. We have to prove that, oh, actually, 16-year-olds are really engaged in voting. Is the average UK voter super politically engaged? I'm not sure they are. So why is it just by virtue of you being 16, you have to like go through these like massive hurdles, or all of you have to be super politically engaged? Most people in this country are not very politically engaged because they don't have the time.
your average voter is absolutely not politically engaged all the time. There are definitely people out there who vote every 4 or 5 years for the prime minister. And I know that because look at the atrocious turnouts during local elections.
I feel like what a lot of politicians miss is that people generally just want things to work for them. As we have it now, there is a group of 16 and 17-year-olds going into being able to vote for political parties, whoever they want to vote for. And what do they actually have to offer them? Can you name for me now? I'm a member of the Labour Party. I can't specifically name any policy really off the top of my head that seriously benefits 16 and 17-year-olds. I think a combination of enfranchising 16 and 17-year-olds, improvements to political education and citizenship education at school could really, really change the way our democracy works and how political parties respond to voters. Because for so long, young people have just been sort of neglected. You give young people a stake in something, political parties will listen. That's the logic. That is the reality. And I think we will see that feed through, I hope, from the major. Even the Tories are talking about reforms to tuition fees.
Well, yeah, because I mean, let's face it, the main reason why a lot of political parties don't engage with young people is that traditionally, at least, young people don't vote. By the time they're eligible to vote, there's either not a big election coming on, so they don't really like engage with politics, or politicians don't appeal to them because young people don't tend to vote. It's like an Ouroboros snake eating its own tail of make it make its own sense. Yeah, politicians tend to go towards the voters who they know are going to vote, and it's often retired people who don't really have anything better to do than to engage in the political system. Whereas for young people, even if there is an election on, how are they going to find the time of day? Like they have to work 17 jobs just to afford rent. There is no space to there's no space to vote.
You're also forgetting the fact that they now need ID.
Yes, ID, which they might not have because it's at least £40 to get a provisional driver's license.
I did see that in the bill they're talking about allowing people to use bank cards as ID because obviously there's the argument that there's been like what, like 10 offences of electoral fraud, I guess is the word, like taking on someone else's identity. So they're like, we'll relax that a bit.
I
And the other solution is allowing them to use student ID if they're not already.
Yeah,
Like,
or a
true.
bus
because when,
pass.
yeah, or a bus or an Oyster card, or I don't know the full list of what IDs are allowed, but I remember being when I was in sixth form, we had an ID card with our name and picture on that was issued by the school. So why can election authorities, for example, not accept that? The other issue I find massively, and this is off on the need for ID when you vote. Local authorities are only allowed to issue certificates within a certain period of when an election is being held. So why can't they issue that outside of that period? Because if someone really wants to vote and they don't have ID, they can just get one, keep it, it's free.
But I have the simplest solution to this whole ID thing. You know those polling cards that they send through your post that say, here is your polling station? Use that. Like that has your address on it, that has your name on it. That's all you really need. Put a picture on there, say this is now your official ID. Bob's your uncle.
But then you'd have to send a picture of your local authority every time you wanted to vote.
I mean, I've been using the same photo of me 10 years ago on my provisional license, which expires in 2030. I think it can be like a once in a 10-year thing.
Do you want to talk about the criticisms of this bill?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, right now there are only two political parties that oppose 16-year-olds, and one of them I think it's fair to say it's very self-serving because it's the Conservatives and Reform who don't back this. And I believe the reason Reform gave was literally, oh, Labour are only doing this to get more voters because young people don't vote for Reform.
No, I mean that was a conversation, but I do think the concern and the obviously counterpoint to that is reform are polling fairly well with young people. But I think also even coming from a left-wing perspective, even if polls showed that most 16 and 17-year-olds would vote for Conservatives or Tories and it was a Labour government implementing this legislation, I still wouldn't not support it because there's no reason why, in my opinion, you shouldn't be expanding franchisement. It comes back to like, and the same argument I make about electoral reform. There is a massively progressive argument for massive electoral reform, like changing from first past the post to something else. You have like people in the Labour Party going, no, 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 we can't do that because there are problems with proportional representation, for example, and first past the post gives stable governments. It's like, but you weren't saying that in opposition, were you? Like, you can't draw the ladder up under yourself. I think the party supporting it are Labour, the Lib Dems, and the Greens. And I would imagine they'd be tabling a fair few amendments to it to strengthen it up because there have been a number of sort of concerns that it's not strong enough. Like one of them
Yeah.
I thought was particularly interesting was it doesn't actually give the Electoral Commission any additional sort of teeth. And even they've called for it to be beefed up to sort of give them more independence. Because at the moment, the government sets the strategy and policy direction of the Electoral Commission. So it's still dictated from by a government which is obviously run by a political party. Removing that part of it would give them true independence, and this bill doesn't do that. One other thing I thought was quite interesting was a lot of stuff in this bill allows ministers to change things without going to Parliament for a vote. And again, I have massive issues with the fact that that's even a part of our democracy anyway. And I understand why, for certain things, you might need minor changes, and a minister might be elected. They might not want to do a whole massive bill to change something minor. But a specific example of where this has been done recently is with immigration rules. There's been changes to the immigration rules which have been put through on asylum without a vote because it's within because of previous legislation. It's within the Home Secretary's gift to make changes without it being debated or voted on in Parliament. Now, I don't think anything really as important as our democracy and how it functions should be delegated to one minister dependent on who it is on that day.
I read like an article by Spotlight on Corruption, very good read, and they were talking about the lack of a donations cap. It allows like a more level playing field for every party if there is like a hard barrier of how much money you can that can be raised. But yeah, obviously Reform don't like this because I think they have been overstating how much young people like them.
I think they've been doing that for a lot of the electorate, not just young people. But
Yeah. So I think if you did allow more young people to vote, then maybe that whole illusion would be shattered a little bit. That'd be a bit embarrassing for them.
you all pretty much just said what I was going to cover. Like the obvious holes in it are, I mean, the biggest one for me is cryptocurrency. Like cryptocurrency is, in my opinion, a scam. It just means that a lot of money can be moved around by very suspicious people for their own nefarious purposes.
It,
I mean, this is just goes back to like my general frustrations with bills introduced by Labour. They are good bills. They just don't go far enough.
I feel like that's been a recurring theme of a lot of the things we've discussed on the podcast. The renters' rights bill, we discussed how good bits of it were, but how bits were changed and the stronger parts were taken out. This is the same. In particular, it is a bit weird that they've not decided to even look at crypto donations. Because, given, especially over the last sort of 10 years, the risk of foreign interference in elections and talk about that has gone up. Like allowing crypto donations to continue literally allows that to happen. It just seems like a massive missed opportunity. And again, it comes back to what we've said multiple times about this Labour government. They have missed for groundbreaking bits of legislation that they're putting forward because it's the first Labour government in a flipping long time. they should be being bold, and that's again one of my core frustrations with the current state of the party. But that's an aside. But again, this bill is something that really could be groundbreaking. It could bring massive change. It could bring massive improvements. But they just seem too timid, and there's no reason for them to because their majority is huge.
There is ever any government that this government reminds me of, it's not like Tony Blair, it's or even like Clement Attlee. It's the Labour government of like the 1960s. Another government that passed like a bunch of really great bills that enfranchised a lot of people, like the abortion rights bill, the decriminalization of homosexuality, not getting involved in a forever war started by the United States on the other side of the world.
You know,
History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme a lot.
was just gonna say, like the comparison is really interesting because like look at how like Harold Wilson came down. Like it was not really a nice end for him.
Like, but a big difference between like that Harold Wilson's government and this government is that Keir Starmer has a whopping majority. You don't need to be acting like Harold Wilson all the damn time. Like, do something.
I mean, unless he does something, the next election will literally be like his election in what 1970 odd. Anyway, he lost to was it Edward Heath, I think.
Oh God. Anyway, I think that about covers everything, listeners. Stella, welcome to the cast. We hope you had a very good first episode.
Thank you very much. It was very fun.
Yeah, 16 and 17-year-olds are going to be able to vote in the next election, hopefully, maybe, and a bunch of other stuff. We'll see you next month, listeners, where we will be doing a preview with some very special guests of the local elections. Until then, I've been Julian in Bristol.
I've been Chris in London.
And I've been Stella in Manchester.